All right, let's get started with fonts and spacing in CSS. So at the top of the activity, there are some articles that you can read. Some of these you may have read already, but you can read them again if you need a refresher. Next, we're going to talk about fonts because we're going to be changing the fonts in CSS. So if you remember, we looked at W3 Schools a few weeks ago at web-safe fonts. Okay, so we're going to reference that in a little bit. There's also another website called CSS Font Stack that has more web-safe fonts for us to look at. So again, we're going to look at that because here's what we need to do. When we select a font family, you learned this in your Khan Academy lesson. When you select a font family, let's say you chose Helvetica, let's say that the user's browser, so whoever's looking at my website, their browser doesn't have Helvetica. Helvetica is pretty common, so that's not very likely, but let's say they don't have it. If they don't have it, what's going to happen? Well, the browser is going to give them Arial because we gave them a fallback font. Now, if they don't have Arial either, we just say, okay, just show them, just use whatever sans serif they have on their computer. Okay, so now you're letting the browser pick for them. So this is good because you still have at least some control of what font is being served on their computer and some control of what that interface looks like to them. Now, if you choose Rock Salt, so these are all web-safe fonts, but if you choose Rock Salt, you need to import it using Google. So I'm going to go over these instructions in this video because this is slightly outdated because Google has changed their interface very recently. Okay, so, and you're going to get the import URL, which you should be used to because we saw this in the site plan website, but I'm going to go over how to get your import URL. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is change the body font. So we need to get our import URL since I'm going to use Google Fonts, and then we need to use the font family property to apply the fonts. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to check out my site plan first. And remember that I chose Merriweather and Montserrat for my fonts. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts. Oh, yep, that was where I wanted to go. Google Fonts, fonts.google.com. And look for my font. So one of my fonts was Merriweather. And I get to choose which font weights I want. So I want 400. 400 is the regular weight that fonts are by default, and then I want the italic as well, and then I want 700, which is bold, and I want the 700 italic. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to the home page, and I also want my font Montserrat. I'm going to select that font, and then pick the font weights that I want. Again, I want 400 because that is the regular font weight, and then I want 700 for bold, and then bold italic. Now I have this panel over here for my selected font families, and I can go to embed. There we go. And I can click import. And now I have this import URL right here. So I'm going to go to my website, and I'm on my styles.css. And I can go in and put that import URL in there. And so now my fonts should be in there to use. So now I just need to put them in here. So if I look at my site plan again, my heading fonts are Merriweather. So let's do that. Again, we're using the font family property. I'm going to put in Merriweather. And you can see that applied. And now my paragraphs, the rest of my text, is the Montserrat. So I'm actually going to have the body by default be Montserrat. So here's my body. I have that background color on it, remember? And we're going to go font family, Montserrat, and now it's applied. Now I don't have fallback fonts, so I need to pick some that are web safe. So I'm going to go to the CSS Font Stack site and no play videos. Okay. And my headline font is serif. So I want to pick a serif that looks kind of similar to Merriweather. So, okay. Here's what Merriweather looks like. So it's kind of boldish. I don't know, Garamond is kind of similar. Georgia is okay. I don't know. I'm not going to do a huge comparison right now. We'll just go with Garamond, okay? So if for some reason the Google fonts don't load, then we're going to say fall back onto Garamond. I don't know if that's really how you do the font. We're going to go with it. And also the fun thing here is that it says how common it is on each computer. So actually on a Mac, only like 50% of people on Macs have this font. So it's possible that one won't load. So I'm going to do another fallback, and I'm going to use Georgia. That's my second, or it was my third fallback. Do I know how to spell Georgia? My husband's from Georgia. I should know how to. And then the last fallback is I'm going to say, okay, you have none of these fonts. Just give them a serif font, whatever's on their computer. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the body. So Montserrat is the font I want them to have, but if for some reason it doesn't load, let's check out some sans serif fonts here. Actually, Avant-Garde is pretty close, but it doesn't, people on Windows don't really have it by default, and Mac only 1% of people have it, so it's not a very good fallback. Let's see what else. Like pretty much everyone has Arial, Calibri. A lot of Windows people have it, but not very many Mac people. Okay, I'm gonna do, I wanted to do Geneva, but not very many people on Windows have it. I'm gonna use Century Gothic. Yeah, Century Gothic as one of my fallbacks. And then I'll do Verdana, and then just sans serif. So now I'm telling them, okay, if Montserrat doesn't load, then use Century Gothic, but if they don't have Century Gothic on their computer, then use Verdana, and if they don't have Verdana, fine, just use whatever sans serif you have available. There we go. Alright, that's step one. So we have those fonts on there. And now we want to adjust the font size. So most of the time the default font sizes are fine. So if you notice we have some default font sizes on here. The headings are automatically larger than the paragraph text. Those kinds of things. However, our links up here are kind of small. Usually we want them to be the same size as the text down here. But for navigation, we want them to be a little bit larger so that users can see them easily and click on them. So we are going to go in there and change them. It says we want them to be 110%. So we are going to use 1.1M. So let's do that. So we already have a style here for our nav A. And this week in Khan Academy, I think you're actually learning about how that selector works. So we used it last week, but now you should understand more about it. So now we are going to do the font size, 1.1M. And now those are a little bit bigger. Looks great. Let's go back to the instructions and see what's next. Okay, so now we have the fonts, and it talks about how the images, or the fonts and images, are pressed right against the border of that box. So actually, yeah, let's check that out. Oh, that's my site plan. Yeah, so everything is just smushed right against here, which doesn't look great. And so we're going to have to use what's called padding to fix that. So we'll do that in a second. I want you to pause this video and check out this opening the box model article here, because this is going to teach you more about how this works and will make more sense. More things that we're talking about here soon will make more sense if you read that article. So pause and go do that. Okay, hopefully you have gone and watched that video now, and we're moving on to step 4, which is to add padding. So you can do this however you want to. It doesn't really prescribe how to do it, but I'm going to give you guys an example. So on here, we know that this paragraph could use some padding. So if I go into my HTML, What is my bottom paragraph? It's the section home paragraph 3. Okay, so I can go to my styles and go to home paragraph 3, and then I could add some padding, and I could just do 1M all the way around it. And let's see. See, now that gives some good padding, but there's not padding around these things, so I don't know. And I don't want this to be the only one that has padding, and I don't want to have to add padding to every single element, so I am actually going to add padding to the main section. And it looks a little bit goofy because this is a very small viewport, so I'm going to look at my site in a different window. And okay, so there's some spacing. I want more. So you guys can play around with this and see what looks good to you. So this is one of the parts of the website where you get to do what you think looks good and feels right for you. So play with this, have fun with it, and make sure that you feel like these elements have the right amount of spacing. So I'm going to go with 2 M's. That's fine. Well, you know what I'm realizing with doing the main is that now this image here has padding around it, and I don't want it to have padding around it. So I'm going to look at my HTML again and see. Oh, that's the positioning activity, sorry. Okay, here we have, so in our main tag we have our div with home box, and then we have our home grid div. Okay, so actually that's the one I'm going to add the padding to, is the home grid instead of the main. Okay, so let's try that. Home grid, oop. And we'll do padding 2M. And now see, this image doesn't have padding, but these ones do. But I feel like there's too much padding there, so I'm gonna go 1M, because that's top and bottom, and then 2M will be the left and right. So now there's not as much padding on the top and bottom, but there's more padding on the sides. I don't know, I like it, so I'm going to keep it. Let's keep going through the assignment. Okay, so now we want to pay attention to proximity. What is proximity? Proximity is a design principle that we rely on to know which elements on our page are related to each other by their distance from each other. So our headlines, for example, are the same distance from the images as they are to the paragraph. So with the rule of proximity, we're a little confused. We're like, does this headline go with this image or does it go with this paragraph? And so because we know that this headline goes with this paragraph, we want to make this headline closer to the paragraph than it is to the image. So, play around with the line height and margins of your headlines to bring them closer to the paragraphs that they belong to. Okay, so let's do that. And we can also play with line height to see how it affects the readability. So this will be fun. Okay, so here we have our paragraphs. Okay, let's play with our paragraphs first. So I'm going to create a P element selector. And we'll use line height, because I just want to show you guys how this works. And if we do a line height of 1, see how they just got really close together? Now we could do a line height of 2, and now they're really spread out. It's like a double-spaced paper, guys. Alright, let's do 1.5. That actually looks kind of good to me. Like, it's readable, there's space, but not like a crazy amount of space. Do like 1.25. I like that. I like 1.5 a little better though. I lean towards having things spaced out. Okay, so there's line height. Okay, so it mentioned playing with line height for headings. So let's do that. So we have line height. What if we give it a line height of 1? Does it get any closer to the paragraph? I think it kind of looks a little closer to me actually. If I do like 0.5. Is that? Maybe. Yeah? 0? Yeah, that looks closer to me, but now it just looks smushed. You know, because it looks like it's really close to this, but I feel like it needs to be further away from that image. So I want to keep it as a 1, which I think is the default. Oh, well, this one's not even a good example because we put the padding up there. This one is the one that we should be looking at. Let's look at that again. Line height 1. Didn't change anything. 2. Nope. Looks like it's the same distance, just further. 5. Looks like the same distance, but further. 0.5. Yeah, that's not really doing it for me, huh? Okay, let's try margin. We'll do like a 1M. But now that doesn't work. So, and I don't want margin on the sides, so I'm going to do 0 on the sides. Guys, this just isn't working. Let's see what the instructions say. So, okay, step 6. Why isn't this working? Okay, so it's just not working. So let's look at our web developer tools. Okay. So I'm going to take off this margin here. And I'm going to go to my site and pull it up and take a look at it. So if I look at my H2 headlines, I can see that there is some margin on it. So down here, I can see the box model. So here's my element. If there was padding on it, I would see that in green. If there's a border, I'd see that in yellow. And the margin is kind of this orange-brown color. So I can see that there's margin on it by default. If I look in the styles here, I can see that these are the styles that I wrote because here's, it says styles.css right here. And then here it says user agent style sheet. So these are the styles that are on the elements by default. So I can see that it has some margin by default. I can see that the paragraph has some margin by default. But it's kind of confusing, right? Because the margin here on the paragraph is 16 and the headline has a margin of, what was it? 19.9, basically 20. Has a margin of basically 20 pixels. But when I have this highlighted, you can't see the margin on the paragraph. Do you notice that? So what it does is it takes the default margin it takes the margin of one of them, whichever one is larger. So for the H2, or for here, it's taking the H2's margin since the paragraph is smaller. And so since the paragraph is smaller here, you can see that it's closer to the image than it is to that headline. So let's see what the instructions say to do about that. Okay, so we looked at it in the web inspector and we noticed the things. We saw the box model. Okay, we talked about this as well. This is where we talk about that because the H2, oh, theirs is 22. Mine's only 20. But we talk about the sizing of the margins. Okay, so this is where we can take advantage of the fact that margins can be negative. You can set negative margins on things. So a positive margin pushes things apart. So if margin is like 20 pixels, then it's going to be 20 pixels away. But if you put a negative margin, it's going to be closer together. So we are going to try adding a negative margin bottom to the H2 tag. Okay, so let's just go into our code here. And okay, I'm just going to do it to the H2 tag, and if I needed to add it to more in the future, then I can do that. But I'm going to put it in the right spot. Okay, so here's our H2 tag. I'm going to do a margin. bottom, I don't know, what should I do, like negative 0.5 m? Okay, look how much closer it is to the paragraph now. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so we have that. We have our negative margin bottom so that it's closer to the paragraph, so that we know that the headline is for the paragraph and not for the image above it. Okay, and now that we have that, that's all we have to do, and now we just have to validate the HTML and the CSS. So let's check that out. I'm going to close out of my font sites that I have so I don't have a bazillion tabs up here. And now I'm going to go to the HTML validator, and this is my site URL. So I'm going to put the address in there and just check everything's looking good. Okay, now I'm going to go to the CSS validator and check on my CSS. I'm going to put the address in there, check it, and it's looking good. So I know that I don't have any errors and I have everything I need for this assignment. So I do want to say for this assignment, what I did was just an example, and you are free to play with it and make it look exactly how you want to. So if you want more spacing on the sides, if you want less spacing on the sides, you can play with the padding. You can also add padding between the paragraphs if you want. And let's say, I don't know. So, okay, we have this headline. Let's say you want to add padding on the bottom. You can totally do that. And also I want to show you in the box model, we have the box model, you can see that the padding is green and our margin is orange. So you can play with the padding and the margins to get your site to look exactly how you want. This was just a really quick run through, quick as I could go run through to show you how to do the assignment, but I want you to play with these things and get this looking how you want it.